at the end of the year, it's a really good time to clean up your classroom, get all of your students' work graded back to them, return everything to them. It's also a really good time to, clean up your digital classroom in Google in order to make sure that it's all ready to go and kind of wrap it up for the year and close it off, and so that you're all set and ready to go next year. You can create your classes and get your students added, and it all be nice and organized and ready to go. So this is a good time to just have a little cleanup and make sure that everything is good to go. So one thing as we go through and talk about how to clean up your Google Classroom, one thing I really want you to keep in mind is to remember that everything is created in your Drive. It's not actually on Classroom. Classroom is just a platform that we use to, communicate with our students. However, it is not the actual files. It's not the actual slides or anything like that. So when we're talking about Classroom, we're also going to be talking about your Google Drive. And so just keep that in mind as we go through. The first thing that you want to make sure that you do to clean up your classroom is to make sure all student work has been returned to them. So in order to do this, you're going to go first of all to your review section up here. And the reason that we're doing this is because in Google, the way that it's set up, anything that the students have turned into you on Google, it transfers the ownership from the student to you. So you now own that student's work. So until you return it to them, they do not have the ability to edit anything on that document. So returning the file to the student gives the ownership of the document back to that student. So when you are on the homepage, you'll go to your to review section, choose the class that you want to look at. I just happen to be, go automatically down to this physics class. And you'll see that there are assignments that have been turned in, but they haven't been graded. And so what you'll do is choose the assignment, and then once you've scored it, you're going to make sure that you return the assignment to that student. You want them to have the ownership back to that document. For one, it's going to clean up your Google Drive a little bit, but also it's going to give them that feedback, that assignment that they're going to be able to have access to. So that's one thing that you're going to want to make sure that you do. The second thing is any class that you're not going to use anymore. And I always recommend that you start creating new class on Classroom, because it helps you sort through and keep it a little more organized. Now, you can archive classes. Archiving does not mean that the classroom is gone forever. It's almost like a filing system. So you have the classroom on your homepage right here, but we're just going to archive it. And that means that you're going to be able to pull from that classroom later on. It's like pulling from a file cabinet. You're going to be able to access anything that was in there, but it's not going to show up on this main page. And the way that you're going to do that is you're just going to click on these little snowman dots, and you're going to go down to archive. And that'll move that class. It's going to pop up with this little, like, do you really want to archive this class? I do. And it'll move it from that homepage. And you can see everything just shifted up because I moved that first class that was on here. And that class isn't gone. It's just moved from the main page. So when you click back on this little hamburger menu, you go all the way down, you will see all of your archived classes, and they're all going to be there. They didn't go away. They're just not on the main page. Now, if you ever for some reason wanted to delete a classroom, this is how you would do it. You cannot just accidentally delete a classroom, because you have to archive it first. Then if I wanted to go up here, I could move it. I could copy the classroom. I'll talk about that more in a minute. We could restore it. That would put this class, which I'm going to go ahead and do. I want to put this class back on my home page so it'll show up there. Or now I can delete it. You can't accidentally delete your classroom. You have to archive it first. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and restore this one because I'm still using it. And then I'm going to go back to my home page, and you can see there it is. If you don't know, you can also rearrange your classes on here. You just kind of click and hold and then drag the classes around. So you might want to prioritize kind of above the scroll the classes that you use the most. And that's kind of a helpful way to keep these organized by prioritizing them. You could want them, in order from when you see the classes, first, second, third. If I was a student, that's definitely what I would want to do. So that's one thing that you want to do. If you are not going to archive your class, some people choose not to do this, and that's fine. I recommend it. The class is always going to be there. It keeps it clean. Um, but it's not something that you have to do. So you could, if you have a classroom that's exactly the way that you want it, click the little snowman and you're going to copy that. You could copy the class and that will transfer everything over. The topics, all of that is going to transfer over and create a new class. It is not going to transfer over the students, and it's not going to transfer over the announcements, and it's not going to transfer over any of the grades because the students aren't there. So that is something that you could do. You could also, um, on here, so you could copy a class, but one thing you also want to do, if you're going to reuse a class, so this is a class that I plan on using kind of year after year. Let's say on here, I have a group of people, I don't want them to be in there anymore. Um, but I might want to go through and remove the students. So if it is a class that I'm going to go through and reuse, you're going to click this button to select those students, and then I'm going to remove them. So that's one thing that you could do if you aren't going to archive that particular class. And again, our whole focus with this is just cleaning up those classrooms and making sure that they're ready to go. I'm going to jump over to um, my Google Drive for a minute and talk about that kind of in that section just to see some things that I want to make sure that are organized in here. A few things to point out. One thing you might want to do is make sure that do not ever, I've got mine colored red. Um, Google Drive automatically creates a classroom folder for you. You never did this. This was created for you. But this has all of the assignments that you have used or been turned in for Google. It can get a little overwhelming if you've created or used or been enrolled as a teacher of a lot of different classes. Like this is pretty lengthy. I would just leave it alone. But never ever delete this folder. You just want to leave it there. If you choose to organize these, you can, but that main folder needs to stay. If not, your Google Drive will become a mess because all of those subfolders, all of those assignments that are in those subfolders are just going to go all over the place. So make sure that you never delete that folder. Any of the others you can organize however you want. One thing that I'm using right now is that I'm classifying mine by years of when I'm using materials. In the classroom, you might want to have a folder for U.S. history. You might want to have a folder for biology and then another one for integrated science. So it could change depending on exactly what classes you need, but this one, leave it be. Something else in your drive is you might want to, let's say I'm going to create real quick a new folder and I'm going to call it, I'm just going to make it a APHG, the AP Human Geography course. In here, I might want to create a folder that's just for exemplary work. So anything that students have turned in that's just really good stuff, before I return it to them, I might want to make a copy, move it into this folder. Might not want to return it to the kit. I might just want to keep it. So it's just something to think about. Anything that's really good, you can just keep that and and hold on to it. So that way, when I go to, show that assignment to students, I will have a really good example and it'll tie to the rubric. It will just show students what the expectations are for that particular assignment. Sometimes our students really need to see a visual of what that assignment looks like, especially if it's maybe a project that they're looking at or working on. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, in your Google Drive, one thing that tends to build up throughout the year without us realizing it is our Google Calendar. So I'm going to go to my calendar real quick. I can type and show you how this is done. So on here, what we're going to see is all these different calendars on here. A lot of these, I've gone through and cleaned mine up, but they're created like for you. So like this SCHS teacher group, I keep that up there. Generally, you'll have lots of different calendars and stuff on here. But what you're going to do, if you don't want to see these anymore, let's say you archived your geometry classes, what you might want to go through and looking at your calendars is just to exit out, and you're going to remove that from your calendar just to clean that up a little bit, because otherwise it could get where there's a lot of different calendars on here. So that's one thing that you can do in order to clean up your Google Calendar. All right. So the last thing that you might want to think about as you are kind of wrapping up the year is reflection. What worked? What didn't? How can you make your integration of Google Classroom better? It's just a good time to make a note, pause, reflect on the year so that you can enjoy your summer. Think about what worked, what didn't, what were some huge obstacles that you had. I feel like a lot of times, our students teach us a lot, especially about technology and what works and how we can better use it. So in order to avoid some of the mistakes that we may have had this year, then you want to take a minute and reflect on what you've learned. So those are just a couple of steps that you can use in order to organize and clean up your Google Classroom so that you can kind of end the year, go into summer, and really know that everything is behind you.